So we don't see this Brahminical patriarchy thing there until a narrative came where, until an agenda came to convert the people and to make it seem like they need reforms. You are right that why are only Hindus being put under the lenses? That's because our education system has made us like that we have become very Marxist, I should say, Marxist, and we have been taught to use the conflict lenses in every situation. So the ancient Indians, Bharatiyas, used to think of Purusharthas. So we have to achieve the Purusharthas, the goal. We have been born in this world, and we have to try and achieve the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha.
Namaste. Namaste, Sahanaji. Our guest, Sahanaji, is here with us. And really happy to have her again. Satyameva Jayate, the first English program that we did was with the Sahanaji. So it's a pleasure to have her again in the show. It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yes, it's always a pleasure.
Today we are talking about the importance of women in the educational heritage of India. That is the topic that we are going to talk about. And like we usually do, Vidya ji, we can go ahead with the introduction.
Okay, done. Namaste and a very good evening, good morning to everyone here. It's with great pleasure and pride that I introduce our speaker for today, Srimati Sahana Singh. Sahana ji wears many hats. She's a commentator, a writer, an engineer, an editor, an environmental as well as social and cultural activist, and a passionate Indologist all at once. Sahana ji, who holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering as well as a master's in environmental engineering from Delhi Technological University, worked initially as an engineer in the environmental department of HPCL refinery in Mumbai. She went on to win a couple of national essay contests and eventually took to writing as a career after moving to Singapore. Following a few of the awards that Sahana ji has won, the first one, winner of the Water Media Network Journalists Competition, which was conducted by the World Bank and was awarded during the 3rd World Water Forum at Kyoto, Japan in 2003. The second, winner of the Developing Asia Journalism Awards in the infrastructure category, which was held at Tokyo, Japan in November 2008, in which journalists from Asian countries competed. And the third award, winner of the top prize for her short film, The Forgotten Cycle, presented at the Urban Water Movie Contest conducted by the Delft University of Technology, Netherlands in 2012. Sahana ji, who is an author, an editor, as well as a columnist, writes on several topics related to water management, environmental issues, ancient Indian history, Indian knowledge systems, social issues, etc., for both online blogs and websites, as well as several publications such as the Washington Post, the Discovery Channel Asia, Reader's Digest, Swarajya, India Facts, Asian Water Magazine, and many, many more. Sahana ji, who is also a member of the think tank Indian History Awareness and Research, IHAR, which has its headquarters in Houston, USA, has been a moderator for panel discussions, especially on water management at several international conferences. Sahana ji, along with being passionate about travel with respect to connecting with her roots, as well as exploring different civilizations and cultures, is also deeply into social activism. She is on the board of several non-profit institutions connected to ancient heritage and education of Bharat and restoration of ancient Indian culture or samskara. She is actively involved in the rescue work of Hindu refugees. Sahana ji has several talks and discussions showcased on platforms like Chitti Media, Sangam Talks, etc. and on topics what have been mentioned above. Sahana ji established herself as a sought-after author by publishing the following books. The first book, The Educational Heritage of Ancient India, How an Ecosystem of Learning Was Laid to Waste, which was published in 2017 by Notion Press, goes on to describe how the ancient multidisciplinary centers of learning existed in several forms and how these ancient knowledge systems helped in fueling a knowledge revolution around the world, making Bharat the most sought-after knowledge destination for several non-Indian students. Her second book, Revisiting the Educational Heritage of India, published by Vitasta in 2022, goes on to explore in greater depth Bharat's unique ecosystem of learning. In this book, Sahana ji has collated information from oral history, local lore, travelogues, surviving literature, inscriptions, salvaged manuscripts, etc. This book puts forth steps which can help one imbibe the most relevant aspects of the ancient Indian knowledge systems by incorporating it into the current structures of education system in Bharat. Sahana ji, today it is indeed an honor, a pleasure for us to have you on board on Satyameva Jayate for the second time. It's a real privilege to hear you speak. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know you had asked me to make it more concise, but I would not have been doing any kind of justice to you if I'd cut it short. So thank you so much once again, all yours. Thank you, Sahana ji. Thank you, Ravi.
Sahana ji, yeah, the first part is actually for you to present the subject. Once you're done, let me know. Then we will take questions from the audience, and then we will go through the Q&A. So, mic is yours.
Sure. Thank you. Namaste to everyone, and special namaste to Vidya ji for giving me such a long, detailed introduction. I was hoping that you would really condense it to 4 lines. But I just want to mention that I'm no longer a part of IHAR, which you mentioned, Indian History. I left them last year, not part of them anymore. So don't want any confusion on that. But it's amazing how you went and made me remember all those things. It feels like a different era when I was so focused on water management, water issues, and still had not understood the extent of work that's needed in history and in Indian education systems and all, which I'm working on now. So yeah, that feels like a different phase of my life, and now this is a different phase. So it was nice to hear my own introduction and remember my journey. So thank you. Now jumping into my topic on the contribution of women to India's educational heritage. So the first thing that I want to say is that education was as important for women as it was for men in ancient India. If I have to be very, very specific, it was starting from the Vedic period, where we actually see all the examples of women studying to high levels, women being totally part of the education system. So that is the ideal that we always have to look up to. So we have Saraswati, who is depicted as the goddess of learning, the Devi of learning. I don't like the word goddess anymore. And she's the Devi of learning, speech, eloquence, right? And it's not just in India, but in different parts, wherever India has left or Bharat has left her imprint, Saraswati is there. You can see the impact of Saraswati. Thailand, Japan, Cambodia, Myanmar, all these places. So knowledge got respect. Wherever men and women of learning went, they would be respected. So in the same sense, women were never, a learned woman would be respected to the same extent as a learned man. So whenever people ask me this question, what about women? And I always tell them that knowledge is respected. It doesn't matter to them whether it comes from a man, woman, or child. That is the culture of India. We also have young children whose knowledge was recognized and then they were put on the learning path, right? So the Upanayana ceremony was probably performed for women too. I mean, many people are emphatic it was performed. Some people say we are not sure. But the fact is that there are many women mentioned in the Rig Veda. And so we can say that women also were undergoing the Upanayana ceremony during the Rig Vedic period. And we have many verses composed by women also in the Rig Veda. And we have mention of women such as Vishwavara, Sikata Nivavari, Ghosha, Romasa, Ropamudra, Apala, Urvashi, many. Some of the women are said to be not really women in flesh and blood. Maybe they were legendary characters, but there are others who existed in flesh and blood, right? So all these are mentioned. And, there are so many shlokas that have to be chanted every day. And in those shlokas, which every Hindu has to chant, there is a mention of those women, which means that they must have made a huge contribution. Otherwise, why is everybody required to remember them every day? Only sad thing is because so much time has elapsed, we have lost out on the works that they composed. So we just have a mention of their names, but we don't know what were all the books that they wrote, what were the works they composed, right? So that knowledge gap is there. Now, we also know that for the yagyas, the husband and wife sat together and performed the yagyas. And there were many mantras, shlokas that had to be chanted by the woman only. So they would sit together. So it was never considered complete unless the dampati sat together, the couple. Okay. And we also have mentioned in the text of women sitting alone and doing a Homa Yajna. For example, there was Kaushalya in Ramayana. She's mentioned doing a Havan all by herself, praying for her son, right? And she's also called a Mantravid. And Mantravid is a very high level, high attribute given. It's not just simply given an epithet of Mantravid. That means she's very well versed, very learned. Okay. And then we also there is a book on education by Altekar. Altekar's book on ancient Indian education is quite famous. It was a very important reference book for me. And he points out that there was a separate term for a female teacher, which was called, which was Upadhyaya. And it was different from Upadhyayani, who is the wife of a teacher. So he's saying this is a clear indicator that there were many women teachers at that time. Otherwise, why would this word exist? Right? And it's mentioned in so many texts. It comes in Bhagavata, two daughters of Dakshayana, they're experts in philosophy and various other subjects. So, we can see the mention of learned women in so many shastras. And it was desirable that a woman of high learning also married somebody with high learning. It was not liked that a woman with high learning marries below her. So in a way, they understood compatibility, because, if she's very learned, marries somebody who's not learned, then there will be some friction. So they always wanted that she marries somebody who is more learned than her, so that she can have conversations, right? Intellectual conversations. And there is a shloka in Atharva Veda which says that a woman has a very little chance of finding a good husband unless she's educated, unless she's highly educated. So this also indicates to you the importance of education. And then there is a marriage shloka which says that the wife should shine as a speaker, a good speaker in the assemblies, in the sabhas. So that also shows that, women are not at all excluded from education. And then earlier on in the Vedic period, the age of marriage was very high. It was like 16 to 18 compared to what it became later. Right? Later on, child marriage came later. But if you look in the Vedic period, it was 16 to 18, by which time a woman would be fully educated and should be, very mature. Remember, in those days, they were not, women were taking girls, boys, everybody was given responsibilities at a very young age. So they would mature quite fast. Not like today where, even at the age of 22, 23, after graduation also, people are not mature. They don't know, they don't have any skill by which they can earn revenue for the family. They have no sense of responsibility. It was not like that. So in ancient times, already by the age of 10, 12, girls and boys would be very mature. They knew how to survive, subsist, how to take care of others around them. And so women marriage age was around 16 to 18, which is high. If you compare with the world at that age, at that time, look at the Romans, look at everybody, we really had advanced to that level. And then most women would settle down to a life of domestic duties, cooking, taking care of the family. But there would be some women called Brahmavadinis who would be very dedicated to learning, and they would show the signs of being interested in higher knowledge from a very young age, and they would pursue the path of learning. And so they would be allowed to do that. And so learning also meant a lot of traveling. And we have evidence of women who are traveling for the sake of education. They're traveling to far-off universities, they're traveling to meet gurus, and then they're coming back, or they're going wherever they want in search of learning. So those are the Brahmavadinis. Just like the female rishis, basically female rishis who would travel. So we might see that. Now, there is an example cited of a Brahmavadini called Vedavati. She was the daughter of a sage, and she did not marry at all. We see her being mentioned. Then in the Kaushitaki Brahmana, you see a lady scholar who proceeds to the north. Now, I don't know if it's north of India, must be the north of India. And then she attains the title of Vak, because that's some title that is given to her after she attained learning. Okay. And the Brahmavadinis were achieving a very high level of scholarship. They were very respected, right? And then I also want to mention that sometimes, in Sanskrit, there are different words for the gender. So for a person who is specialized in a certain subject, if that person is a man, there's one word for it. If the person is a woman, there's another word for it, right? So it's interesting that there's a word called Kaka Krutsani. Okay, and there's a work. So whoever specialized in this, the ladies who specialized in this work were called Kaka Krutsanas, which is mentioned in Mahabhashya. You understand? So the Mahabhashya is a work on grammar. And so women who are specialized in that complicated subject, complex subject, they have a different name. Now, why would that word exist if there were not enough number of women who were studying that? And we see that all along. Mimamsa also is a very complex subject. It's even more difficult to understand than mathematics. In fact, mathematics is easier than complex concepts in Mimamsa. And so you will find terms for women who are specialists in that. Right? Then there are some plays written around the 8th century, plays written by Bhavabhuti, and in that we find a reference to co-education. So there's a play called Sanskrit play called Malti Madhava, and in that there is a female student called Kamandaki, and she's a close friend of two male friends, Bhurivasu and Devavrata, and they are studying at a famous university in Padmavati. That is mentioned in that play. Now, of course, it might be a fictitious thing, which it doesn't. So some people may say, oh, he imagined a world where there's a co-ed. But we don't know. I mean, we have to give the benefit of doubt. It's quite possible that there was a co-ed institution where boys and girls were studying together, because we do find them studying in Gurukulas. Girls and boys were studying in Gurukulas. We see that in some of the Gurukulas, not all. So there could have been universities where men and women were studying together, right? And there's another Sanskrit play called Uttara Ramacharita. Same Bhavabhuti has written this play. And in that, there's a young woman called Atri. And she tells another young woman, Vasanti, that she's going to South to get education because her professor is too preoccupied and is not giving enough attention to her. So, these things are shocking when you have an impression about ancient India, which is very primitive. And then you hear this and you feel like it's today, a woman talking today, that my professor is not giving enough attention. I need a different guide, that kind of thing. So there's also a word for, there's a reference for co-education in another book, in Kashika, which is a commentary on Panini's grammar. And there's a term called Kumari Daksha to denote the pupils who are joining the school of Daksha only because they want to look at the girls who are in the class. Again, this is a reference to co-education, though not a very happy reference, but they are called the bad students, the bad male students who have joined the class so that they can look at the girls in that class. So again, this is a very ancient period. Now, I have mentioned in my book that Indians love to debate. So there would be so many debate tournaments, and it was like, in Roman times, we hear of gladiators and things like that. But in India, we hear about debate tournaments that people would throng to, because that would be the opportunity to listen to intellectuals and see different points of view and make up your mind about whom you want to support. So in that, we see a lot of women participating in debate tournaments. So the most famous one I can think of, which is also in my book, is the exchange between the philosopher Gargi Vachaknavi and Yagnavalkya. So in that, it happens in the court of Janaka, of Mithila, King Janaka. Not the Sita. I don't think it's not that Sita's father. This is another Janaka. And there is a very heated exchange between them, and there's a lot of exchange. So that shows that women are being invited. If there is a scholar who's worthy, whose views should be heard, she's being invited to the debates, and she can also challenge. In that, in fact, Yagnavalkya was not expecting that he'll be challenged like this. And he shows his impatience with her when she goes on asking him question after question after question. So it's a very interesting exchange. Of course, he's also a bit rude to her. He says that if you keep asking like this, your head will explode. Something like that is there. But whatever be the case, it shows that women are very active in education, especially those who want to. I mean, if those who don't want to do it, that's different. But those who are active, want to learn more, they are being given the opportunity, right? And then the interesting thing is about Yagnavalkya's life itself. He had two wives. And there is a mention in the Upanishad that one wife, Maitreyi, is very interested in learning, in knowledge, whereas the other wife, Katyayani, is interested in jewelry, all the typical womanly pursuits, dressing well, all the material comforts. So when he decides that he wants to pursue the higher learning, so tells his wives that I'm going away and you can stay here, you can enjoy everything and you don't have to give up anything. But Maitreyi insists on going with him because there is a beautiful conversation. She says, what is it that you're going for? And then she comes to know he's going for something which is going to make him immortal because he's going to transcend the material world. And then she says, why should it be only you? Why can't it be me too? And then there is a dialogue, and then finally he realizes that she's equally interested in this and she has the adhikara for this kind of knowledge. So he takes her away with him. The other wife stays back and takes care of all the possessions, takes care of the wealth that he has, right? And administers it. So this is again a beautiful indication of how women are also a part of the educational system. Then the famous debate between Adi Shankara and Mandana Mishra is another example. I even have got a sketch of it in my book where two stalwarts are debating and the judge is a woman. So this itself, this one picture should tell you everything about what our society stood for. So it didn't matter whether it's a man or woman, but if the person is knowledgeable and learned, then that person, the gender doesn't matter, right? So that was the thinking. And for me, during my research, I came across a very interesting carving in Karnataka, which was for me the ultimate proof, because it's it's an archaeological evidence. All the other things we are talking about is coming from literary sources. So I was very excited when I came to know about this sculpture of Savinir Madi. It was found in Kolar, when they were digging, I think probably for the mining, that time they found it. And this lady is seated and she's holding a palm manuscript. And she's wearing a pleated garment, and then her hair is tied up in a bun in the manner of the sadhus and the learned ascetics, the ones who had given up samsara for the sake of learning. So she's dressed like that. And then the inscription in Kannada says that she's Savinir Madi, the daughter of Nagarjunaya and Nandi Geyabbe, and she's learned in all the shastras. And you can also make out that she's unmarried because otherwise they would not mention just the name of the parents. The inscription would have mentioned her husband's name. So she's clearly unmarried and she's her parents' daughter and she's engaged in learning. And there's a sculpture of it, which you can see even today. So this is a solid example that I love to cite. Now, it's not very clear to me whether all the women who studied and discussed the Vedas, were they actually chanting the Veda with the prescribed intonation? Because today there are many learned people who say that we don't know whether they were actually chanting the Vedas. We don't know. Maybe because they say that these Vedas have a lot of power and some of them are meant to be chanted by the men, and women, if they chant it, it may negatively impact their organs in the body and things like that. A lot of things that today, we hear that women shouldn't be chanting it. It's not really coming from male patriarchy. If you dig deeper, they will say it's not good for the woman. So, the Gayatri Mantra, in fact, Gayatri Mantra, if it is chanted wrong, is not good for both men and women. They say that. Okay, Gayatri Mantra has to be chanted. It sounds like a simple mantra, a simple line, but there's a way of saying it. There's an acharana, there's a swabhava, there's everything that you have to have before you say it, and also the intonation, the way you should say it. So it's a very esoteric and mantra, and it is given to only people with adhikara. So I don't know whether women were barred from it all the time, or only some women were saying, or were they just studying the Vedas? It's quite possible that many of them they can read it, they can understand it, they can talk about it, but chanting with the intonation, I'm not sure whether it was being done. Okay, maybe the Brahmavadinis were doing it and the others were not. Because you see, there's also the thing about daily chanting. This is not something you do now and then. There is a whole protocol involved. So you wake up at a certain time and you do it, and you have to do it every day, day after day, day after day. And women do suffer interruptions, right? They do have periods. And when they have periods, they are feeling weak and they don't want to do anything. It's not good also for their health. So it's possible that to protect them from all these things also, certain things were, let go. That, okay, you don't need to do this. So it was made easier for women. So it's possible. Now, I also want to mention that in the Mauryan period, there was a special category of exceptionally talented women, highly educated, and they were trained. They were given special training in the 64 arts, and they were called Ganikas. That also I've mentioned. Because, when we say women in ancient India, we should not just think about one stereotype of a woman, married woman, or typical woman. There are also different categories of women, and so the Ganika is one such category. It was very interesting because she was having the independence to choose her lover, choose her suitor, and she was helping the king in a lot of decision making. But she was also being paid. She was a salaried worker, you could say, in the king's service. And she was also being used for spying, for espionage, because she had all this knowledge. She would be very, very attractive. She would be everything. She would know every game. Every game that existed, she knew how to play it. Strategic games as well as any other. And how she would form friendships with people, trying to get information from them, networking. All this, she was very good at that, right? So this is one category of Ganika. You find them her coming in various plays written in Sanskrit, and of course you'll find her mentioned. I think she's also mentioned in Arthashastra, and she was labeled as Nitya Sumangali because these ladies were considered auspicious also. So interesting, isn't it? She's a woman who is sleeping with different people, whoever she likes. She's highly, highly educated, and nobody's looking down on her. Nobody's calling her a prostitute. This is something which is mind-boggling, and Westerners cannot understand this. She was called Nitya Sumangali, and she used to be invited to weddings to bless the married couple. Okay, and of course she would also be able to sing all this. And this, in the Devdasi tradition also you see shades of this. Of course, in Devdasi tradition, I don't think she was used for espionage, but the same thing. Women highly, highly trained, talented, and they are respected. Okay, and even though some of them were known to be having different partners in later periods, the Devdasis. I mean, they were not meant to be that way. They were meant to be devoted to the temple deity and doing the puja and all that. But in later periods, there were all these things. Even then, she was respected. She was never, because prostitutes were a different category. Devdasis were a different category who were respected. Again, this is something that the Western world doesn't understand. Okay, so what they like to do is to paint everybody in the same category. Women are ill-treated. They are not educated. But yes, I mean, we'll talk about the later period as we go on. So the 64 arts that the women were supposed to know, it's very interesting because it is mentioned that in the Shastra that it is good for the woman to know all these arts because in case her husband dies or she has no son to support her, then she will need the use of these arts to earn a living. Okay, so this is mentioned. It's mentioned in Kama Sutra that if a woman is required to stay single and support herself financially because of some distressing circumstance, then she should know these arts. Now, what are these arts? In my book, I've actually listed out all the 64 arts, and it's very interesting. Some of these arts are not the simple arts. They're very complicated. It involves chemistry. It involves various other things. So the arts that we typically think of are singing, playing a musical instrument, drawing, all this was there. Women of those times were very accomplished. I mean, if you compare the women of those times with today, you'll find that we are nothing compared to them. We don't know anything, right? So the art of tattooing also was one of the skills that, is listed in the 64 arts. Making beautiful tikas, making beautiful rangolis, of course, interior decoration, producing music, making pictures, making garlands, arranging costumes for a drama, making ornaments, then the medicine. She's also supposed to know, have a basic knowledge of medicine so that if anybody falls ill, she has to know how to take care. There's one of the skills is also about how quick you are, the sleight of hand, quickness of hands. Okay, being quick in doing something. Then, of course, cooking, culinary recipes. She has to know a whole lot of culinary recipes, learning from her grandmother to all the traditional recipes plus whatever else, and her own innovations. Needlework. Then art of solving riddles and puzzles. So women are expected to know all these things. And in those days, there was Antakshari also. What we play as Antakshari was also a skill. And it was not just movie songs like what we do today. They had to chant shlokas and things like that. Like if I chant a shloka, then from the last letter, you have to be able to chant a shloka. So they had games like that. And women were very good in this. Okay. Then art of reading manuscripts. This is also one of the 64 kalas. So think of a woman who has to know all these things. And also, recycling, using things in the house and making new things out of them. This was also a skill. Knowledge of taking care of plants and animals. So it's actually Ayurveda for the plants also, Vriksha Ayurveda. She needs to have some knowledge of Vriksha Ayurveda. She needs to know how to do, she needs to know languages. So knowing just one language is not considered a good thing. You have to know as many languages as you know, the more accomplished you are. All this requires high intelligence, high IQ. If you're able to remember, memory training, as you know, there's a whole chapter on memory training in my book, which I've talked about how memory was highly prized. And same thing, women were also required to remember a lot of things. Today, we don't need to remember anything. Everything is in the hard disk. We can Google, right? So we are not using our brain even to 1/10 of its capacity. And that's why so many things that the decisions that we make, maybe we have not considered all the options, right? Because we can't even remember things. So, but in those days, it wasn't like that. Everything has to be at the tip of your tongue, and something, you're able to immediately analyze it because you remember it, So that was the level of knowledge. Then, if you see even in Buddha's monasteries also, initially he wasn't very eager to get women in. But then later on, the women put pressure and said, we also want to do this. We also want to renounce the world. And then slowly, women also started coming into and you have seen that some of the people who spread Buddha's teachings out of India were Ashoka's daughter. So they were women, plenty of women. Now, the other thing is that in urban societies, which are civilized, where people who are considered to be educated, well-lettered, in those families, even after marriage, a woman's education was supposed to continue. So it is mentioned in Kama Sutra that a husband must ensure that the wife's education is not interrupted, because if he's marrying her when she's young, he can't just now expect her to sit at home and not increase her knowledge. So the tutor would be called at home to teach her whatever she was good at. So if she's good in classical music, then classical music teacher would come and teach her anything else that she was interested in. That was also a duty of the husband, which is mentioned in Kama Sutra. Now, I don't know how many men were doing that. Maybe some of them are not doing that, but it's mentioned that he's supposed to do it. And then, of course, as we go later in history, even when the position of women has deteriorated in society, as we realize that as we progress down the ages, there have been invasions, there have been curbs on the freedoms of women, and they are not moving out as freely. They are not dressing as freely as before. All that has happened. Especially, it came to a very bad state during the Islamic period. Okay, even earlier, of course, it had started deteriorating from the Vedic period onwards, because there were other invasions as well, but not to the extent that it happened during the Islamic period. That is the period when it really went down, women's position, and it was not safe for them to go out, because now the rules have changed. Suddenly now, even the slavery became very, very common after that, because ancient times, dasis were not like slaves that later came during the Islamic period, because Islamic period, we actually had slave markets. So slave markets were girls who have been captured from the villages, they have been inspected thoroughly for their bodily attributes, and then they are brought and made to stand in the market, and people can come and take 4 or 5 slave girls, whoever they like. All that started. Obviously, when the whole milieu has changed, the whole thinking, the samskara has changed. There are people with no samskara at all. You think girls will be given the same freedom as the Vedic period? That's not going to happen. So it started off to protect women, that, you better stay at home. And then slowly that led to a decline in the educational standards. Though, of course, tutors were still coming. We do hear many, many cases where the people are better off. Of course, tutors are still coming home, and they're teaching everybody, all the children in the family. It's not like girls are told to sit separate, let only the boys learn. No, all the brothers and sisters together, they're learning. So that culture was there. But this attrition was also happening because of all these invasions. It was happening, right? So we have the names of many poetesses, who have written amazing poetry, and which are well remembered. In the 1st century, there is Gatha Saptasati in Prakrit, which includes poems written by many famous poetesses, Reva, Roha, Madhavi. Okay, all these are very good, well known. Then, Bhaskaracharya. Bhaskaracharya was a famous mathematician. And he has written a book called Leelavati, in which he has addressed the whole book, which is a maths book, which is completely addressed to a girl. Because from time to time he says, oh, beautiful girl, answer this question. So it's a very complex arithmetical problem, and then he's saying, come on, my beautiful girl, I'm sure you can answer this question. Tell me quickly. Now, we don't know who is that girl. Initially, I thought it was the daughter, but I was corrected. It can't be the daughter because he's using a lot of words which sound like it's for a lover. So it could be his lover as well, but somebody whom he's going on, who's telling her to solve the math problems. And of course, it's called Leelavati as well. So whether that girl was called Leelavati, I'm not sure. So this also shows that, these are hints that we get that women are educated, right? We can't get solid evidence like archaeological evidence for everything. But we also should rely on the literary evidence of women's learning. Then the other thing that I always like to highlight is that it's the extent that a woman would go for learning, that would determine how much learning she would get, right? It's just like today. Not every woman will go for masters or PhD and things like that. I mean, there are some women who would not want to do that. They're happy with a bachelor's degree and then pursuing something else. So probably it was like that also in ancient times. So why are we we are imposing today's values of equality and trying to see, what equal number of women in getting educated in higher education, just like the men. So you will not find that. In fact, most of the women would be performing the domestic duties, because you remember, women have a biological function. You can't overlook that. So this is something that I always like to highlight. So women have this, if every woman starts giving up samsara and becomes a Brahmavadini, do you think the society would have stood? It would not have. It would have collapsed. So at the same time, I don't think lots and lots of women wanted to become Brahmavadinis. Why would a woman want to give up all her pleasures and devote herself solely to learning? It's a hard life to be a student, to be an eternal student, because one of the guiding principles for a student is that you have to overcome your desires. Remember, in those days, education was not some small thing, like, just learning a skill. Learning a skill was a vocational training. But real education was conquering your mind, conquering your desires, and bringing your mind to a state where you can contemplate on big truths. So not even every man wanted that kind of education. So we must remember that the major education that most people got was in some skill. So this whole system of jatis that we had. So people were born, if you're born into a carpenter's family, then you know that you have a duty, you have a moral responsibility to ensure that this profession survives, and all the knowledge associated with this profession also survives. So it's like men and women, children, everybody would know from the day of birth that they belong to this jati, and they had a pride in that jati, and they have to preserve the knowledge of that jati. Okay, so it's so most 80%, I'm just making a guess here, that maybe I think 80% of people would be preserving the jati knowledge, or maybe it would be 90%. Very small number of even men. I mean, brahmanas also, not every brahmana was going for the highest of learning, right? So they would probably get the basics of higher learning, and then they would get into grihastha, and then they would again have the same question of what do you do for a living? So it's important to have all the skills so that you ensure that you have living. And then the highest level of, the students and the scholars, the society has to take care of them. That's another thing, right? So on the grihasthas fell the responsibility of taking care of the society, of ensuring that people who are students, who are the scholars, are getting food to eat, their medicines are being given, their clothing that they need are being taken care of, any needs of theirs. So in that context, if you look at women's education, then I would say that women were all getting educated in skills. And somehow, for some reason, people are not looking at that and counting that as education, right? So every family, whether even if it's a doctor, Vidya's family, the woman would have a lot of knowledge of medicine, okay? And so she would know the herbs that are used for different diseases, because the husband doesn't think that it's only my knowledge and, you all are my servants. No, it's all our knowledge, and we have to preserve this. We have to take care of patients. And they have the responsibility that, we can't please the patients, we can't We are not doing this for money, those kind of things. And so preparing the medicines, grinding it, making paste of it, all these things, women would be helping with that. Children also. So children, again, I always say that a child at the age of 8 or 10 would already know hundreds of medicines, hundreds of herbs, where they are available, right? That is the way we were growing, everybody with knowledge, right? And Brahmavadinis in small, minuscule numbers would be there. I wonder if I should stop here. Okay, maybe I should just mention the period of the Muslim invasions, which caused a huge decline. And also then came the colonizers. When the colonizers came also, that time what they did is they changed the whole system of education. So now those pathshalas, which existed. So if we go into Dharampal's writings, we see that he talks about the surveys that were conducted by the British, right, in the late, right, starting from the 18th century, and it went on to the 19th century as well. So a lot of surveys were conducted to find out the level of education in India, because they wanted to know that. The British were great in collecting data, which they will use to which they will use to exploit the society, right? Because they knew that now we need to change the education system, and we need a lot of people in the army. We need people working for us as servants, as clerks, so that we can enrich the British Empire. So when they did all those surveys, it was found that in many places, like in Kerala, for example, the girls were going to school in big numbers. So this is, imagine, already a decayed system after, say, various invasions, various rules, where people's needs are not being taken care of, they're being converted to a different religion, all these things are happening. And in spite of that, the primary school system still existed. That is so amazing. And in Kerala, boys and girls were learning together in pathshalas. Okay. So this is something which is interesting, but mostly in all parts of India, the girls were being homeschooled. Okay, because it was understood that the woman is the first teacher of a child. So if it was well understood that if a woman is illiterate, then it's going to cause the child also to be not very interested in studies. So women used to know how to read and write, but it was going down. It was going down, so it was not like what it used to be, say in the earlier part of the Common Era, 2nd century, 3rd century. That level was not there in the 18th century. Okay, and in fact, Gandhiji himself said that. He made this famous comment, which has been quoted by Dharampal, that the British have left us more illiterate than we were 100 years ago. Now, this was something that, in fact, shocked the British themselves when they heard it from Gandhi, because they didn't expect it. And there was a lot of debate with him. And they said, how can you say that? We are trying to improve education. We are setting up English medium schools. How can you say that people are more illiterate? So he was falling back on what he has also seen, the village pathshalas, where every child used to go and learn how to read and write, how to do arithmetic, right? In addition, they were also getting the moral training, because Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavata, all these were taught in pathshalas in 18th century India, which we see. So that means it must have been there for thousands of years. So Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all this was taught as a part of the education system. And it's because of this that they would know the famous stories, the role models that they need to emulate. And through these epics, they would also learn language, they would learn grammar, and they would address various ethical questions. They would talk about whether it's right or wrong. They would learn poetry. They would even learn maths. They would learn astronomy, because so many things are mentioned in these epics where there are astronomical references to the position of the sun and the moon and the seasons and all that. So all discussions used to come by merely discussing the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the other texts, right? So it was part of the education system. And so slowly, women's freedoms went down because of invasions, and also the colonial rule. Let's not think that the colonial rule was very benign towards women. There are plenty of stories where, the soldiers, when they would go through the cities, the British soldiers would pick up any girl they liked, any girl. So in fact, beautiful girls used to be hidden when British soldiers would go into a village, because they would pick up whoever they liked and take her and make her a concubine, make her a mistress. So that during the British period also, this danger was there, and girls were not being sent to school because they were worried about all kinds of things, that maybe she'll be converted, to a different religion, or maybe she'll be sexually harassed. So a lot of families did not want to send their girls to school during the British period. And that is when a lot of missionaries came into the scene, and they started going into the families, telling the girls to study. Of course, some of them did good work. Christian missionaries also did work in because it was already a degraded society. So now they were telling them that girls must also go to school. So then slowly that started. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar did so much of good work because he was always giving examples from the Shastras to say that women were highly educated and women should go to school. So, the way the women were brought back into education, I feel that it wasn't done the right way. The way it was done is the British way, the colonial way, where they were made to feel that, you need to learn from us, right? You're all degraded. You're not sending your children to schools. So you should call, whereas in the West, women are going to school. So the way everybody was brainwashed is that we have to learn from the British how to educate ourselves. We have to learn the sciences from the British because we never had any science. And that way the brainwashing happened. And a lot of girls, boys, everybody who went into the Western education system, they became self-loathing people who did not know their own greatness, who did not know the culture with the heritage of Bharat. And so they got completely brainwashed. And now it was like they're reforming the society from the Western point of view. So I think I'll end it here. It's 45 minutes. If anybody has any questions, then we can make it interactive.
Actually, Sahanaji, in the prose of your explanation, you have actually given a lot of answers. But at the same time, I'm sure there are people who are yet to read the book. So I want people to read the book. So for their interest, the interest to build up. If you could just mention about Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, like that. Could you mention more about the reformers who focused more on uplifting women? The education of women, especially once the Britishers came into the scene.
No, so your question is, sorry, can you just tell me what the exact question is?
That is, basically, I'm talking about reformers and institutions. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar is already there. Along with him, were there other people who did work towards the upliftment of women, especially during the time of the Britishers? Because
so many, but they are very. I find that the names of the reformers who were bringing the Western point of view, I feel that they are more in number. So that's why I mentioned Vidyasagar, because he stands out to me as a person who's taking the civilizational view of reformation. I mean, it's not reformation; it's about bringing back the memories of the ancient times, which was very forward and modern, versus the view that you are very backward and you need to go forward by copying the British, right? In fact, most of the reformers were of that kind, the kind who would deracinate the people. So Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar belongs to that very small group of people who actually understood the way that we need to change by going to the past and taking the best of the past. Now, others also were there, like Sri Aurobindo came later, and he also spoke, in the civilizational language. But most of the others, who were brought women who became the role models of education in the 19th century and 20th century. If you dig a bit deeper, you will find that it's the missionaries who are actually training them, teaching them, and then these ladies, the scholars, the well-known scholars and reformers. Many of them have converted to Christianity, and they have spent a lot of time in England. All these things are there. But at the same time, they are doing good work in terms of getting the children, girls to go to school, telling them that, your role is not just how to knowing learning and knowing stitching and cooking. You also need to read books written by people. You need to know worldview. You need to have an opinion on something. So these things they did well, many of the reformers. I don't want to name them, some of them, because I'll get into a controversy. But yes, there were many of them. There was one Ramabai, for example. She did a lot, and she did a lot to educate women in the 1800s. But when I go and look into her history, I find that she converted to Christianity. So from the name, you can't make out that she has converted to Christianity, and she'll be put forward as a role model. Yes, she made a lot of girls go to school, but then inside she was having this turmoil where she's thinking that our dharma, it has restrictions. It doesn't allow women to be free and things like that, right? This whole concept of freedom itself is very Western. What is freedom? freedom to do whatever you want, is that good for the society? These questions were taken up by our civilization, but it was not being understood during the British period, when the education system was being revamped.
Okay. Actually, that you mentioned about freedom, it's actually that's another question that I had in mind. The freedom, what you like, after all the observation, after the research, you have seen the kind of freedom that women enjoyed during the Vedic time, and compared to the freedom now that the present day women. So when you compare them both, what do you see? Like, what are the differences? What are the similarities, according to you?
The whole thing is, the concept of freedom was, if you look at it from the dharmic way, right? Dharma comes first. So freedom is all within that, within the dharma. So you're not going out of the bounds of dharma. So that was the way. So it's not like freedom means that today I will not do any work at all. I will not, I'll not help anybody. I'll just take care of myself. I will not give food to my children. Only I will eat. Things like that. That was not there. It was always about what are you doing for the society? What are you doing for your family? So within that, all the freedoms came, right? So it's very different. At the same time, of course, education, you want to study what you want to do, you're interested in exploring something, some facet of knowledge, but you also have dharma to perform. So if you have, and we see the struggle. There are no easy answers here, right? So even in later periods, when even for boys, boys who want to, even Adi Shankara, he wants to go and pursue higher learning. His mother is saying, no, get married, have a family. So, this struggle is there for everybody. We all have it. But today what has happened is some kind of hedonism, you can say, where it's just freedom for the sake of freedom. That was not something, that doesn't make sense to me. And even if it does, it should be only a small section of society which does that, right? It must have been there even in ancient times. There would have been those Charvaka people, right? Charvakas are known, but even they were not like today's people who are simply disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, right? So, if, okay, I may marry, I may not marry, those kind of things. Why should I marry? And having hundreds of relationships, but they don't realize that ultimately it's not going to give you inner joy. So in ancient times, all the institutions that have been built, it's all about maintaining stability in society, and also at the same time maximizing your happiness, right? Because the sages have understood that if you don't marry, you don't have children, there will come an age when you are, going to feel lonely. There's nobody whom you can call your own, and that's the reason the elders would say, get married, right? And initially, some children would resist, maybe as they grew up and they feel like, I don't want to get married, but they would understand the loneliness that would come. They can see the elderly people, what they're going through, so they need company, right? So that's how many people will be persuaded to get married. But those who know themselves very well, like, okay, I'm not going to be doing well in a marriage, and I'm really, really interested in pursuing higher education, those people would fight the society and go for higher education. They would leave the house, they would wander to find a guru, ultimately find a guru, spend years and years with the guru, travel around the country and help people, because ultimately whatever knowledge you have, you must share it. It is a runa. It is a debt. If you have learned from your guru, then you also have to pass it on. So that's how we hear of female gurus. They also had ashrams where women were teaching, and students are both girls and boys, right? So we have even Mahabharata, you hear about this learned lady, her ashram, she taught in the ashram. You see that. Other texts also you see that, right? So you have grihastha ladies who are learned, and you also have these ascetics, female ascetics who are learned. Okay? So freedom in the context of dharma, that is what was considered the ideal. And there would have been people who went out of that even in those times. But today it looks like there are thousands of them who just don't know the concept of dharma. They don't know the concept of dharma, and they evaluate freedom in terms of, okay, I want the freedom to study every subject that I want. And because of that, they don't know what they want to do. Because there is a freedom now, there's like 10,000 subjects you can study. But they don't know how to know themselves. What are they really good at? They don't know how to control the mind and still the mind and go within and find out what they really are, what is their true nature. Does your nature, does your swabhava allow you to study this subject, right? So those deep questions they don't know, and they just simply use the freedom to get more confused.
Thank you, Sahana ji. Beautifully explained. Go ahead, Ravi.
Sahana ji, my first question. You had mentioned about the people were really educated and all that during the time. Then it declined when it came to the Islamic period, and further declined during the British period, like that. So I understand from my reading that in the 1800s, in the 1880s and all, India's literacy rate came even down to about 44%. And at the time of independence, we had only 12% literacy rate for the country. In your research and everything, is there any indication of actually what's the percentage of the people who are educated in the period? I'm asking this question specifically because there is an argument always that we hear that the education was brought to India by the Britishers, or those are the ones actually who taught us to learn and all that. But we understand from our scriptures, and we understand from our the enormous amount of the theatrical work that we see, that was not the case. But I want to know actually whether this came across in your research. What was the percentage of the society was learned at that time?
No, actually, I look at all these numbers also with suspicion. Yes, the literacy rates had gone down. It has really gone down because of various reasons. I mean, imagine from 12th century when our whole society was in disarray, everybody is running here and there. Our temples are being destroyed, our books are being burned, right? And so people are migrating, running away, and the trauma that they have experienced, right? So it's just the literacy levels would have gone down, but has it gone down to very, very low? I mean, I'm not sure of that. I mean, I didn't find actual data of how the census was conducted and the sample that they have taken, and whether it's a reliable one, because it would have been different in different parts of India. In Kerala, for example, it's very clear that for a very long time literacy has been high. It has not even gone down to during the Islamic period and various other, even the colonial period, right? So it was people knew how to read and write in their own mother tongue, Malayalam, right? So similarly in other parts of India also. But yes, it would have gone down, but that's because now they are being driven to poverty. So in the colonial period, when they are being driven to poverty, now that whole system that they had earlier, where money is coming in, they have a skill and they're selling products. All these jatis, they were making things which were exported. So money is coming in, and so the financial part is taken care of, and so the children can spend time studying something, reading books, learning from the elders. But now when they are being driven to poverty, then it's all about fend for yourself, find something to eat, survive, keep your honor intact. Those kind of questions take precedence. So it's very sad when we talk about literacy, and then we exclude all those other factors, and we just make it seem like it's a patriarchal society. That's why girls are not being allowed to read. That's why they are so illiterate. Well, guess what? Even for the boys, the literacy had gone down tremendously because of the rules that we had. We didn't have a proper integrated governance. Right? We were under attack. It was a society under attack, and then sections of society are fighting back. Wars are happening, and so the old rules which existed, that civilians will not be affected, which is there mentioned in so many shastras, that the civilians should be not disturbed, and we have the war in the battlefield, which is where we'll fight, and the others are continuing their professions. No artisan should be affected. All these are there in our Sanskrit shastras, right? But all those were flouted. So now everybody is is ready to run if something happens. We have to take our bag and baggage and run. In such a society, you can't expect that now it's going to be the same knowledge-centered society. So yes, literacy, everything has gone down, but by the surveys that they conducted reveal that they were somehow trying to still conduct the pathshalas. And it's very moving. You'll find even the district collectors, some of them are saying that, our taxation system is actually ruining their education system. And you'll find a quote by Ludlow where he's saying that wherever the village, the Hindu village has survived, their education has survived. And where we have swept away the village, there the education also has gone. Where we have swept away from our taxation policies, their education has not survived. So this has been mentioned by a person called Ludlow. And then similar others you'll find, even Campbell is talking about it. Campbell was a civil servant in South India, and he was saying that our taxation policy is ruining, because he's saying that before we came, the zamindars, all the rich people, the elite, were supporting education. They were supporting the scholars. So, all the ceremonies that we have, if you look at them, right, in which we are supposed to invite scholars and give them food. 5 scholars at least you have to give. They say Brahmana, but they actually mean scholars. Okay. And you have to give them food whenever you do a puja. But forget about Brahmana. Even in the non-Brahmin villages, any schools could be set up by anybody. Remember that non-Brahmins also had, in fact, they had more access to money compared to the Brahmanas, because Brahmanas were looked down upon if they amassed wealth, whereas there was no such restriction for various jatis, which were non-Brahmanas. They could amass wealth. That was good. I mean, they were earning. And they would set up their schools too, to which their children would go. So this system was there. And if you see in the villages all over India, there is a custom which existed even in the 20th century, because my father-in-law was telling me about it. He came from a very backward village, my father-in-law, in Uttar Pradesh. And he was saying that every family was required to send some rice, some dal, various things to the teacher's house. So the teacher's house, the teacher himself is also not very well off. He's also living with his torn clothes and everything, whatever he has. This is a country which has been ravaged by the British. Even then, from every family, some amount of grain would go to the teacher's house, and the teacher is remembered in every festival, every puja by all the families, and they would send something. So it was called a Siddha. That's what he told me. My father-in-law. When I started reading the 18th century books and the 19th century books during showing the British period, the word Siddha is mentioned, and it's mentioned in Bengal that even they are sending Siddha to the teachers. So this shows that everybody had this sense that the teacher has to be respected and taken care of, because he's teaching or he or she is teaching our children, right? Our children must be indebted to this teacher and the teacher's family. So I think literacy has gone down, but the respect for education has not gone down. It is very much there, because even in the tech, they still cite that Gargi. Whenever any very learned woman comes, they say, "Oh, you are like Gargi." That memory is there. So even when they have become poor, we have lost our culture, but we still remember those stories.
Sahana ji, actually, I will go with the next question. See, at the moment, actually, you have mentioned about the woman currently get confused with the freedom. They think actually to do whatever they like is freedom rather than. But usually, what they have actually that what you call an inferiority complex, or comes from the knowledge that actually the women were not educated back in the day, or they were not given enough privilege and all that. But what would be your answer when somebody says the women were not treated properly in the past, or they say that actually in the Bharat culture or the Bharat heritage, the women were not given enough prominence? What would be your counter to them?
You mean to say to people who are saying women were not given prominence in the past? Is that what you are saying? That's not true.
Especially from women themselves. I hear that from women themselves.
The thing is that the individual was never supposed to get prominence anyway. See, it is always the way we are misunderstanding it is we apply today's lenses to understand the past. So, women were, of course, given prominence. They were supposed to be the grihanis with, they are looking after the house, they're looking after the relationships, they are looking after the health, everything. And so, how can you say women were completely ruling? They were ruling the households completely. And so many things that you think the men are doing, it's actually the women who are making them do it, right? So it makes no sense to me. So if you look at the women separately, that was not the way the society even looked at itself. They were looking at themselves as family units, as communities. So what is the community doing? How is the community achieving it? What are the goals of this community? And how can we all together achieve it, right? So all this kind of separation where we are seeing, okay, what is the woman doing, man doing? This is not the way. The ancient Indians, Bharatiyas, used to think of purusharthas. So we have to achieve the purusharthas. The goal, we have been born in this world, and we have to try and achieve the purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, taking them all together, right? And so it is like that is why when they do the yagyas, my husband and wife sit together and do it. It's like you're incomplete. Men and women are complementary to each other. So that is the thing. It's so funny that today we are thinking in these separate paradigms that, okay, what is the woman doing, what is the man doing? No, it's like you have to look at how everybody is contributing for this society, right? Some woman will be doing less, some woman is doing more, some man is doing more, some man is doing less. That's the way. And then is knowledge being preserved? Are we preserving knowledge? Are we preserving the traditions? That is the way they were looking at it. There is all these hundreds of traditions that we have, and all of them are rooted in knowledge. Is the true knowledge of that tradition understood? Is it being preserved? So we are supposing we are worshipping Saraswati in a certain way. This is what we need to do. All those things. Because when you chant it, all the shlokas that we chant, we think it's just mindless chanting. No, all these sounds that we are emitting are supposed to be giving certain vibrations. They are they are actually all very powerful mantras which are meant for prosperity, good health. And so knowing all those things is important. So, we were all focused on the inner joy. If you go back to ancient India, it's about how can we all have that inner joy. It is not just external things. So basically, the highly learned people would keep reminding everybody through discourses. That's why temples were also centers of learning, right? And mind you, even in later times, 18th century, 19th century, when they're doing the surveys, some of the civil servants said that it's very interesting that even when there is no school building, the temples are being used for school, for teaching, right? They are themselves observing that. Now, why? Because they see knowledge as sacred. Knowledge is sacred. So temple is a place where they do puja, they do sacred activities. So any hall in the temple can be used for teaching. So that's why any teacher can say, come to the temple and I will hold the class over there. And then the class will be held over there, right? So when they did the survey, the British did the survey, they also noticed that they're using any room in the temple for teaching. Also the rich zamindars, they are also giving their space for teaching. So that's another thing. Bunch of students who want to learn something can actually go to a zamindar's place and say that we don't have any place to study. Can we use your courtyard? And they say, yeah, sure. So you see, this culture was there. So it's only now we go back and like to see that, okay, woman was not doing. Yes, I agree that women were exploited. Women were expected, but that's because, it was a hard life for everybody, men and women. Men are also doing hard work. In those days, we didn't have all these devices that we have today. So everybody has to do a lot of hard work. Men are doing something in the, the plowing the field with those, it takes so much of strength. When he does a whole day of that, a farmer comes home, he wants some good food. And the woman also has been doing a lot of work. All the women are doing, bringing water from the wells, they're cleaning the house, they're doing getting the ingredients, putting it together. So it's everybody is working, right? So it's like, what do you mean by saying that the woman is being exploited? The man is also doing his best. But then, of course, there will be bad men and bad women both. We tend to make examples of those bad people and then try to make it seem like, okay, everybody was like this. Okay, so we need to have a kind of a nuanced look at society and not apply today's rules. Today, I agree. We are all, office work means sedentary life. You're going and sitting in front of a computer. So today you can talk about, yes, equality. Men and women both should be sharing the housework. Because, if the man is just going and sitting in front of a computer the whole day, comes home and does not help the woman at all in any housework, that's not right. So both have to understand that this is the work that we both need to do. In today's context, by all means, talk about these things. But don't go back and ask in ancient time, why is the woman doing this? Understand that, it's a different era where, security, defense, all that has been given to men. And they're protecting the women, right? So there are certain rules that are put, and then there's a society in turmoil. All this context has to be seen when we look at the status of women.
Absolutely. I see actually a comment that came in. Why this question about women applicable to India or Hindus? The same question is never asked about other civilizations.
Never asked about?
Why this question about women applicable to India and Hindus? The same question is never asked about other civilizations.
Yes, that is true, because we have become these kind of people who are always examining ourselves like the other. We have developed these colonial lenses, colonized lenses, and that's part of our education system. We are taught to examine ourselves critically, and then find flaws with it, and then not try to find the connecting factors, not try to find. So that is the conflict lenses that we apply to ourselves. So we don't, we only examine ourselves, but actually we should be looking at everybody and how were women being treated in every society, and what were the laws for them, and then compare with ours. We remember, we revere the women as devis. So we had a whole section of society who were Shakti worshippers, and they were worshipping Devi as a source of Shakti. Okay. So we are already much elevated when you compare with the other societies. So yes, there are human failings where women are being ill-treated and all these things are happening. But there is also an awareness that women can be divine, that God, Bhagwan, is not just male. Bhagwan can be female also, So these things should also be all put together. And you are right, that why are only Hindus being put under the lenses? That's because our education system has made us like that we have become very Marxist, I should say, Marxist, and we have been taught to use the conflict lenses in every situation. So if we see a household, we are trying to see who is exploited here and who is doing the exploitation, who is the oppressor, who is the oppressed. So that is the only lenses that you've been taught. So you're not able to see the harmony over there. Like if a woman is keeping a fast for her husband's health, you're not seeing the love over there. You're not seeing that because the woman is fasting, the man is feeling love for her and he feels a sense of responsibility. And so, this is the way these traditions are keeping the relationships strong, right? You're only saying, okay, why is this woman fasting? Why is the man not fasting? So you are now applying those lenses to the old traditions, which is not right.
Vidya ji.
Yeah, Sahana ji, now we are talking about, I think this is a term which is hated a lot, Brahmanical patriarchy. So how does that creep in, and what were the causes? Because, they try to project that and show that, women were not treated right. So, that this is one of the reasons that, Hinduism is, heading towards a downfall. But, we know that that idea has been foisted on us. So from where did that idea start creeping in? So if you could, throw a little bit of light on that and how it has, women's position with relation to this sort of a term.
So from what I see, Brahmins were very respected, all through the ages, right? Until, the colonial period. I think I can see that Brahmins are being respected. Even the British surveyors are noticing this, that they are respected. Now, why will they be respected if they were such obnoxious people as they are being made out to be, right? Traditionally, Brahmanas are the ones who have to preserve the Vedic knowledge. The Vedic knowledge being of a very esoteric nature, where there is a lot of learning, which is years and years of learning. For just one Veda, you have to spend years of learning, morning to evening. There are certain rituals to be followed. You have to not eat so many things. You can't enjoy so many pleasures because you are learning these Vedas. So everybody knew in society that the Brahmanas who are learning the Vedas or anything related to Vedas, they are sacrificing their a lifestyle of luxury. And so they are spending all the time learning. And so that respect was there. And plus, when they came out of that learning period, when they would give discourses, they carried a lot of meaning for them, right? They would tell them the real meaning of various stories that they know. What are you supposed to learn from that story? They would give them hope when they are feeling down. No, depression is not good. You have to meditate on this. This is how you will come out of your sadness, all those things. Temples also, the Brahmanas who became temple priests, when people went to temples, they got all that comfort by the faith used to be restored, right? So that's how Brahmanas were respected. And teachers, they knew that they are creating the next generation of scholars, without whose help we will not be able to do anything. Remember, Brahmanas had many other functions, but those things, what has happened is this whole negative narrative started coming when the British began to rule over us, and when also the Christian missionaries were finding it very hard to convert Hindus. The bulwark against conversion were the Brahmins, because they would not be taken in by all these arguments that you will burn in hell if you don't follow, this God, or, this will happen to you, that, because they would give the counter argument. No wonder they were despised so much. So if you read, Castes of the Mind, that's another fantastic book, which is telling you all the tactics that were employed, to make the Brahmins look evil. The missionaries have played a big role in making the Brahmanas appear evil. And remember, in those days, they also would highlight all these practices like sati, which was actually only found in very remote, small sections of society. It's not like all over India, women are jumping into the fire, nothing of that sort, right? But they kind of they make it look like a widespread practice, even though it's like 0.001% of people who are killing themselves by sati. So they would make it seem that, this is a religion where there is so much of vice, so much of evil. And so when you convert to our religion, this is good, you'll get all these good things. So for this argument, they needed to show the Brahmana as a bad person. Okay, so that is how it has come. And modern day scholars have made it even worse, the Marxist scholars, by bringing in these terms like patriarchy as something like, well, whether it's patriarchy or matriarchy, both cases there is going to be oppression, if you think of it only as oppression, right? But basically, if you look into the root of it, the father is supposed to protect the family. So, patriarchy means what? Why are you making the word father a bad word? Patriarchy is representing the father, right? So the father is the one who takes the first knock. If the family is in danger, he has to take it on himself and protect the family, right? So this whole thing about patriarchy, matriarchy doesn't make sense in the Hindu context. If you are rooted in your civilization, all these terms make no sense to you, right? So Brahmanas were respected, but I'm not saying that all the Brahmanas were noble, virtuous people, right? They would, of course, have been people who are taking advantage of this respect just because they are being respected. Okay, people who have not been completely got rid of their vices, who have not done enough sadhana, who have not understood the dharma properly, right? Because there is no police everywhere looking at, who is following dharma, who is not following dharma. People are doing pretty much what they like. They have learned, they've got knowledge, but they're out in the world and there is no moral police for them except their internal compass. So yes, there would have been Brahmanas who are bad, pujaris who are bad, who are doing rituals just for the sake of getting more gifts, more money, and they'll scare the people that, you need to do this ritual, otherwise you will have, you will go to Naraka and things like that. But that doesn't mean that all the Brahmanas were doing it. Overall, people had respect for Brahmanas. And I can tell you that if you read G.W. Leitner's book on Punjab, the education in the Punjab province, he's done an in-depth study in the 1800s. And he is saying that they all respect learning. He says even the commonest of person, even a criminal, he's saying, wants to donate to a pathshala because he thinks that will give him punya. That will give him a good life next life. So why are they doing that? It's because they know that knowledge is important. When you give to a school, then you are helping children to learn. So he says, right from the richest people to the poorest, to the the anti-social elements also, he says that they respect teachers and they try to give. And then he also mentions that manuscripts are very preserved very carefully in the houses because they know that these are valuable works and they're kept very carefully. This is also mentioned by G.W. Leitner in his book. So we don't see this Brahminical patriarchy thing there until a narrative came where, until an agenda came to convert the people and to make it seem like they need reforms. Remember, the British, when they initially they were not allowing the missionaries to come into the country because they just wanted a structure in place where they can exploit and loot and take as much wealth as possible from here to England. And of course, that's what they did. That's how the Industrial Revolution was powered. But later, the missionaries started pressurizing the British government to allow them to function freely in India because they said it's your moral right, your moral duty to do it. And in fact, they had debates in Parliament in England. And when finally it was allowed, it was agreed that, okay, we'll let the missionaries work freely. That is when all these narratives came about. The narratives were prepared against Hindus. They were translated into every language. one of the things the missionaries did is to make dictionaries in every language so that they can, help other missionaries also, so that they can understand. Okay, and that's how they would now create this whole narrative, maligning the Hindus and making them feel that you belong to an inferior religion, where your murtis are not helping you, you're doing idol worship, because idolatry was considered the biggest evil. In all, the radicals of these religions, the monotheistic religion. Why radicals? Even normal people think that idolatry is evil, right? And so to root out idolatry, you will see this in the writings of Max Muller also. Max Muller also says idolatry is bad. Even in the people who are saying good things about India, if you go deeper and read their works, they regard idolatry as very bad. And they think it's good when Hindus convert out of this religion. Right? So that's how this whole this Brahman patriarchy thing has developed. And it's sad because, Brahmins became, earlier the whole society used to help Brahmins to pursue their learning. And once the support was taken away, a lot of Pandits were dying of starvation. There is a book called The Pandits, which talks about this. That there was I think in Banaras, there was a Pandit, there's a story of that, of how he started throwing his manuscripts in the river, on telling his wife that, burning the manuscripts. He's saying that nobody is interested in this knowledge anymore, nobody comes to me. And though he was a very learned Pandit, when he died, there was nothing he had except some pots and pans in his house. That's all he had. He had no other possession. So this is the way, it has been, this narrative has been very, very bad for society, And the other bad thing is that when the British people changed the whole system of education, the English educated people started getting higher. A new caste system emerged where English educated people were put at the top, right? They are getting the government jobs, whereas those who don't know English are not getting those jobs. So this created that, and obviously a lot of Brahmins got into government jobs because they were able to learn English quickly. And now the society, the ecosystem itself has changed, and now Brahmins, when they entered the civil services in South India, they became the tax collectors. And now that is how, the friction first started. That now the Brahmins, earlier they were teachers, they were purohits and all that. They were not tax collectors. So now the British system has induced them to enter this service, and that's how they started getting even more maligned. Okay, so this is how we have to understand all these interplay of factors which led to the labeling of Brahmin patriarchy.
Thank you, Sahana ji. That was mind blowing, especially that last bit. It's like all pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. You explained that beautifully. So, Ravi, I'm going ahead with the next question also. I hope it's okay, Sahana ji. I hope you have
sure. I think another 10-15 minutes should be fine.
Minutes more, okay. So this is again, another much, debated term, the so-called feminism term, because when we see about our culture centuries ago, that also centered around feminism. And now there are a lot of women who go around speaking about feminism, and the term toxic feminism has come into play. That is a very it's used a lot in a lot of contexts.
Is it toxic feminism?
Toxic.
Did you say
present day? In the present day, not compared to what it was, during the ancient times. So when we compare both the types of feminisms, what would be like, when you compare, what are the differences that you see?
Huge differences, right? Because the modern day feminism has originated in the West, because women were really being treated as, as in the Abrahamic faiths, women were considered as chattel, as possessions, right? Assets, which, so they were not really given that status, especially because now God became male, right? God became male for these religions. So women didn't have that status. And so that's how the feminism originated in the West. Mind you, they all had this witch burning and things like that. Women who were learned and all who were pagans, who had all this knowledge of healing, who were doing all this chanting. All of these were labeled as witches and they were burned. So they have a whole history of attacking women. And so naturally the feminist movement came. And then during the Industrial Revolution, afterwards also, when women entered the workforce, the bosses were not treating them well. They were exploiting. And, if you see those, in the period of 70s, for example, the way women were being treated in America, it's just shocking, right? They were expected to dress in a way to be attractive, and if they're not attractive, they're no longer, wanted in that company. They can retire because older women will retire because they're not nice to look at anymore. So it was horrible. I mean, sexism in the Western world was horrible, and naturally, as a result, this feminism came. It was justified in America, in the Western world. But what happened is that in India, these people who are now being educated in the Western way, and they're being deracinated. They don't know now anything about the rituals and why the rituals are being performed. And then they are coming to know about feminism in the Western world. And so they start talking about feminism in India as well, without understanding how it should be in India, right? So that's why it has become toxic. Now, the toxic feminism would say that Karwa Chauth should not be, it's a very exploitative ritual, it should not be done. Okay, they don't understand the real meaning of it, where their vratas are kept both by men and women. Men keep different kind of vratas. They are keeping different vratas for self-control, for, higher truths, and for protecting their families. They're doing it. Women are praying for their husbands, for their children, so that this family remains good. So all the vratas are needed, right? And these vratas are creating bonds of love. So this is not being understood by the people who are crying feminism today. But I'm not saying that there is absolutely no reason. In today, remember that society has degraded. We have gone through a period of all these, trauma. And so the men today, they don't even know what Purushartha is. So a lot of men are definitely abusing their wives. There's plenty of domestic violence. If you go and look at the cases, you'll be horrified. So I am not exonerating those kind of people. And I would like the feminists to actually go and support these families. But what I would like to see is that they should be connected to their civilization, be civilizationally rooted and work for women, like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. When Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was calling for marriage of widows, remember Bharat has this tradition that women, in Vedic period, when widows were remarrying. Vedic period, it was totally allowed that a woman could remarry. But later on, all these rules came into play, that women were expected to, after, if their husband died, then they have to just lead a life of austerity, and not be given to enjoying too much and just be very low-key, right? All this happened. So it really went down. Then the freedoms of the freedoms, you should say freedoms, because freedom to even be happy was taken away from them. But not everybody. Again, there were plenty of examples where the widows are, taken control of the house. The daughter-in-law is completely subservient to the mother-in-law who is a widow. So, you have all these examples. It's not like every widow is suffering. No, you have to take that nuanced look. But yes, there were women who are suffering. And so see how Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar did it. He didn't condemn the religion. He didn't condemn Sanatan Dharma, but he was using Sanatan Dharma to bring them back to the greatness of Sanatan Dharma. So he was saying that, marry again, be a grihani again, and take care of your family, now have a new family, teach the children. So all these things he was doing that. And he was quoting Shastras to tell them that you need to remarry, right? And the women should get educated. Again, he was using Shastras. So I would say that the feminists of today, they should move away from that toxicity, that hate for men. Because without men and women working together, no society can be successful. So we must not view the men as evil, and the men have to now be cut to size. We want the man to be masculine and the woman to be feminine. Both should be preserved. We value it. So women should not become another version of of men, right? So today's feminism is like, okay, the woman has to be able to do everything a man does. That is equality. That's not correct. Whereas ours is preserving the sacred feminine and preserving the sacred masculine, both. We don't want emasculated men who are afraid, who are not able to speak the truth because they are afraid, because some woman is going to lynch them, or a woman is going to call them evil, right? So we want that free dialogue, free talking, and we want both men and women to be empowered. That is the society where we work together, right? So it's toxic. The toxicity should go. The Shraddha should come back. Shraddha should come back we should understand that male and female are complementary. That Ardhanarishwara aspect has to be understood. All of us have both male and female in us, but yes, we are predominantly female or we are predominantly male, but we respect both of them as sacred, right? And so we have to educate So wherever exploitation is happening, we have to educate the exploiter by using our own dharmic texts, by using our methods, instead of creating hatred towards our dharma, our society, our culture, and saying that the culture is to blame. The dharma, this Sanatan dharma is to be blamed for this kind of toxicity among men, which is leading to toxicity among females, right? So I think I would say, get back the Purushartha. Go back to getting your Purushartha and everything will be fine.
Thank you, Sahana. Beautifully explained. Yeah, go ahead, Ravi.
Sahanaji, this will be the last question. And it's not something related to that we were talking about. I'm asking a very light question in the end. The whole debate about the India and Bharat that is going on. What is your take on that it's been called Bharat again?
So actually, I've written a whole blog on this in Medium about this. So of course, Bharat is the real name, the true name. I totally resonate with it because of the word, the syllable bha, right? Bha, it's simply, when you hear the word Bharat, right? The word bha simply gives me goosebumps, because bha is associated with light, knowledge. So since I have worked so much on India's knowledge systems, Indian knowledge system, so the word Bharat will always remind me of the huge center of learning that India was, which attracted people to come and study, the best of gurus, the best of knowledge, the foundation of every discipline comes to my mind when I hear the word Bharat. But I don't dislike the word India as well. Because India, that is also not a very new term. We know that the outsiders, the Greeks were, it was the Persians were saying, for Sindhu became Hindu and all that. We know that ultimately became India, Indica. So it is a distorted name, no doubt, coming from Sindhu, but it is also an old word, and people were attracted to India. They were coming to India to study, and they saw India as a land of wealth. So it does remind me of all that. So I don't totally see India as a negative word. When I was in Portugal, I saw this. There was an Avenidas de India. There was the port from where all the ships took off to India. So everybody in that part of the world was thinking, how can we reach India? Because India now, the route to India has been blocked off by the Arabs, and so we have to find the sea route to India, right? And so India, the name India was the one which was spurring them on to make discoveries, okay, to make advances in naval technologies so that they can finally reach India. And that's how that place itself is called Avenidas de India even today, from where the ships use. It doesn't say Avenidas de South Asia. It doesn't say Avenida, any other avenue. I mean, it doesn't say Avenidas de China. It says Avenidas de India. So they were all trying to get to India. And once Portugal found the way to reach India, right, by going around the Cape of Good Hope, that's how they reached India. And then all the floodgates opened and lots of people came. First, they came to do trade, whatever, and then they took lots of things. But yes, India is also the term by which they knew us, and it was a quest for wealth. So it makes me remember that we were very prosperous and we were very great, and that's why people. So I don't hate India, but I want Bharat to be the primary name. Bharat should be the primary name. Bharat, that is India. That is fine. Because India has its history too, and we will be using that word a lot. So we can't ban it. So let's recognize that it's Bharat, that is India.
Definitely. I think actually we can wind up here. Vidyaji, anything to add?
Yes, I just have two seconds I need to say. These books, is it visible? Is it visible? Oh yeah, okay. These books of Sahana ji's, I request, the listeners, the viewers, please go ahead and buy it, because this is one book, Sahana ji, seriously, all because of you, I fell in love with Bharat all over again. That was like when a bulb kind of lit up inside the first time when I read the book and I started watching your videos. I was like, wow, we belong to such an amazing civilization. So if you can buy it, please go ahead and buy. And Ravi, we'll be sharing the links. So nobody has an excuse saying that they didn't get the link, so that will be shared. So thank you, Sahana ji. It's been, for me, it's been a dream come true that we had this talk. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time. I'm really glad that this happened.
Really delightful, and I must tell you that you are also a big ego booster for me. Each time you make me feel important, and then I feel like, okay, I'm doing something, some good work, and I should keep doing it. So you are also motivating me. I'm also.
You are amazing, Sahana ji. You have no idea how amazing you are. So
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Sahana ji. I
Thank
think once again, like I mentioned, like, you were the one who started us with the English programs, and then we had floodgates was open, and we had so many people came in and with the English language, and we did sort of programs with within English. So
Just to
we
wish
should
you all
always
the
remember the first one, right? So
I hope you grow,
and
become big, become the voice of our civilization. Thank you for the work that you are doing. I'm totally aware of all the sacrifices that you are doing. I know that Raviji is awake very late in the night. So
yes, very late. Yeah.
And we thank everybody who came to listen to us. And thank you very much, Sahana ji, once again.